My parents took my money, chose my entitled sister's side, and erased me from the family vacation I helped pay for. So I took back everything and gave them a taste of betrayal. They came back and completely turned my world upside down. My older sister, Carly, who is 28, has always been the favored one. Seriously, if there were awards for being the family favorite, her shelves would be overflowing. Growing up, everything Carly did was flawless. She could undercook a cake, and my parents would declare her a culinary genius. Meanwhile, I could ace a difficult exam and just hear, "That's nice, Elena. Did you hear Carly just became team captain?" To be clear, Carly isn't always a terrible person. She's just Carly. She walks into any room as if she owns it, and my parents treat her as if she does. She's smart, successful, and married to Brad, who basically just agrees with everything she says. They're like the real-life version of a perfect social media couple, flawless on the surface, but if you look closer, you'll find a lot of self-importance. This all began last summer when I returned home from college for a break. I was already exhausted from juggling 2 part-time jobs while keeping up with my studies. College isn't cheap, and while my parents offer some help, it's nothing compared to what they did for Carly when she was in school. They paid for her dorm, gave her an allowance, and even bought her a car. For me, it's more like, good luck, kiddo, hope you figure it out. I arrived at the house hoping for a peaceful few weeks. The moment I walked through the door, though, I could feel Carly's influence everywhere. Mom gave me a 2-second hug before rushing to the kitchen, likely to check on some special dish she was preparing. Dad gave me his usual awkward pat on the back before vanishing into the living room. Then Carly appeared, strolling in like she owned the place, with Brad trailing behind her, carrying their luggage. They were staying for the week, apparently. "Hey, little sis," Carly said, flashing her perfect smile. "Hey, Carly," I replied, forcing a smile. Brad nodded at me. He's not a bad guy, just kind of always there, following Carly around like a lost puppy, agreeing with everything she says. Dinner that night was typical Carly. Mom brought out her special lace tablecloth, the one she only uses when Carly is around, and prepared a 3-course meal. I'm serious. For Carly, it's steak and roasted vegetables. For me, it's we have leftovers in the fridge, Elena. We were halfway through the meal when Carly decided to make her big announcement. She put her fork down and leaned back, as if about to give a public speech. "So," she began, "Brad and I were thinking, Christmas is just around the corner, and we've been working so hard. We deserve a little break, and we thought, what better way to relax than a family trip to Hawaii?" Mom gasped and clapped like a child. "Oh, Carly, that's such a wonderful idea, isn't it, honey?" Dad nodded. "Fantastic idea, sweetheart." I sat there chewing my green beans, waiting for them to ask my opinion. Then Carly turned to me, her smile becoming less friendly. "Elena, do you think you can afford it? Or should your big sister cover your share?" The room went silent. Even Brad stopped chewing his steak. My face burned, but I kept my voice steady. "I can manage, thanks." Carly raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? It's going to be around $5,000 per person. Flights, hotels, activities, it all adds up. I just don't want you to feel left out if you can't swing it." I almost choked on my water. $5,000? That was more than all my savings combined, and I was only making minimum wage at my part-time jobs. But I'd rather eat instant noodles for the next 6 months than accept Carly's charity. "I can manage," I repeated. "Okay, if you say so," Carly said, shrugging. She turned back to Mom and Dad, completely ignoring me. "So we were thinking of staying at this gorgeous beachfront resort. It's all-inclusive, of course, and there's a spa. Oh, and Brad found this amazing helicopter tour we just have to do." Mom was practically trembling with excitement. "That sounds incredible, Carly. We've never been to Hawaii before." Dad nodded. "You two always have such great ideas." Carly smiled like she had just won an award. "Well, you know, Brad and I are used to organizing things. It comes with running a business." Here it was the part where she had to mention the restaurant. "It's been a lot of work," she continued, "but it's paying off. We've got a loyal customer base, amazing reviews, and we just hired another chef last month." "That's incredible." Mom gushed. "Elena, you should really learn from your sister. She's so driven. You could pick up a few tips from her about setting goals and following through." I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. The rest of the dinner was more of the same. Carly talking about how hard she and Brad work, Mom and Dad hanging on every word, and me sitting there feeling like an extra in a play about their perfect little family. After dinner, Carly stopped me in the hallway. "So," she said, crossing her arms, "are you really coming? Or is this going to be one of those things where you back out at the last minute because it's too expensive?" "I'm coming," I said, clenching my fists. She gave me that smirk again. "Good. I'd hate for you to miss out." Just don't embarrass yourself, okay? I mean, it's Hawaii. You don't want to be stuck eating sandwiches while the rest of us are enjoying the nice stuff. I didn't respond. I just nodded and walked away, already planning how I was going to prove her wrong. That was the last thing Carly said to me that night, and I spent the rest of the evening in my room pretending to study but mostly just stewing. My sister's entire personality was built on outdoing me, and somehow no one ever called her out on it. Every word out of her mouth was either a boast or a subtle insult. I was determined to save up for this Hawaii trip, not just to prove her wrong, but because I was sick of being treated like the poor kid who didn't belong. But that dinner left me feeling like I was 10 again. Nothing had changed. The same eager nods from Mom, the same proud smile on Dad's face, the same feeling of being invisible. Carly was still their golden child, just as she'd been since we were kids. 5 years between us might as well have been 50 for all the difference it made in how our parents saw us. They never said it directly, but their actions spoke volumes. Carly was the one they believed in. Thank goodness for Grandpa Thomas. He was the only person in my family who ever made me feel like I mattered. While Carly had Mom and Dad completely under her influence, Grandpa treated me as if I were just as important as her, maybe even more so. Every time he'd pull me aside at family gatherings, slip me a $20 bill and whisper, "Don't let your sister steal all the attention, kiddo. You're special too." Let me tell you more about him. Grandpa was successful in his own right, a businessman who built himself up from nothing. He had this large old house on Maple Street with a wraparound porch and a backyard that felt endless. It was my favorite place in the world when I was a child. He'd let me sit on the porch swing and listen to his stories about how he built his business or how he met Grandma. Carly used to say the house was outdated and needed a major renovation, but to me it was perfect. Sure, the paint was peeling in a few spots and the floors creaked, but it felt like home in a way my parents' house never did. When Grandpa passed away during my freshman year of college, it hit me hard. I was sitting in my dorm room when Mom called, her voice shaking as she said the words, "Grandpa's gone." I couldn't even respond. It felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. The funeral was quiet and small, just the way he would have wanted it. It was held on a cloudy day, the kind where it looks like the sky might open at any second. Carly showed up in a sleek black dress that probably cost more than my laptop, clinging to Brad. Mom and Dad hovered around her, making sure she had everything she needed. Meanwhile, I sat near the back, feeling out of place even at my own grandpa's funeral. After the service, we all went to the attorney's office for the reading of the will. I wasn't expecting much. Grandpa wasn't the type to flaunt his wealth, and I figured whatever he had would go to Mom and Dad. But when the attorney started reading, I realized just how much Grandpa had considered everything. "To my daughter Linda," the attorney began, "I leave the sum of $25,000. Mom nodded, dabbing her eyes with a tissue as if she had expected as much. "To my granddaughter Carly," the attorney continued, "I leave the sum of $150,000. Carly's eyes lit up. She turned to Brad and whispered something I couldn't hear, but it didn't take a genius to figure out she was already planning how to spend it. Then the attorney looked at me. "And to my granddaughter Elena," he said, "I leave my house on Maple Street, including all its contents and surrounding property." The room went silent. Carly was the first to break it. "Wait, what? Elena gets the old house." She actually laughed out loud like it was the funniest thing she had ever heard. Wow, okay, sure. Enjoy that, Elena. Maybe you can sell it and buy yourself something decent to wear." Mom shushed her, but she didn't really sound upset. "Carly, don't be rude," she said, even though she was smiling. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was too stunned. I wasn't sure how to feel about it. On one hand, I loved that house. It was the one place that had always felt safe, and knowing Grandpa had left it to me made me feel like he still believed in me even after he was gone. But on the other hand, I was a broke college student. Houses aren't cheap to maintain, and I knew the property taxes alone would be a nightmare. Still, I thanked the attorney, took the keys, and promised myself I'd figure it out. Grandpa trusted me with this, and I wasn't going to let him down. Over the next few months, I started visiting the house whenever I could. It wasn't in the best condition. Some of the pipes needed fixing and the roof had a small leak, but it still felt like Grandpa was there. His fishing rods were still propped up in the corner of the living room, and his favorite leather chair was exactly where he'd left it. Of course, Carly couldn't leave it alone. Every time she came over, she'd make some sarcastic comment about how outdated the place was. "You should just sell it," she said one afternoon, sitting on the couch like she owned it. "I mean, what are you even going to do with a house like this? You can't afford to fix it up, and honestly, it's kind of a dump." I bit my tongue like I always did around her. Then suddenly, Carly wanted to stay at the house, the same one she kept ridiculing. The moment she said, So, Brad and I were thinking we could stay at the house for a bit, while we sort some things out with the restaurant. My stomach sank. I knew that tone. It wasn't a question, it was a demand disguised as one. I don't know. I started trying to sound neutral. It's just until things settle down, Carly added quickly, flashing her perfect smile. The restaurant's been crazy, and we just need a breather. Brad, standing behind her, nodded like a backup dancer. Yeah, it's only temporary, a couple of months max. Before I could respond, my mom chimed in from the kitchen. Oh, Elena, don't be selfish. They've got so much on their plate. Your family, you should want to help. I felt cornered. On one hand, I didn't want them there. Sharing space with Carly is like being stuck in a competition you never signed up for. On the other hand, saying no would make me the family villain. My mom's guilt-tripping tone sealed the deal. Fine, I said, forcing a smile. You can stay. First, it wasn't terrible. They mostly kept to themselves and I figured they'd be out in a month or two. But weeks turned into months, and soon it was like they had taken over the entire house. Brad filled the garage with his tools, even though he barely used them. Carly replaced Grandpa's old armchair with some overpriced ugly piece she called modern chic, and started reorganizing the kitchen like it was her personal domain. The worst part? They weren't paying a single dime in rent. Not a penny. When I tried to bring it up with my parents, they just brushed me off. Family helps family, Elena, my mom said, as if that was supposed to erase the frustration brewing inside me. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that they'd be out soon, but deep down I knew better. Carly always got what she wanted, and no one ever told her no, not even me. While I studied for midterms in my cramped dorm room, my sister and her husband lived rent-free in my house. Every time I came home for breaks, I had to ask permission to visit what was legally my own property. Let's get back to the present now. Fast forward a bit, and after that summer dinner, I started working myself to the bone to save up for the Hawaii trip Carly had so generously included me in. Between my campus cafe job in the mornings and library shifts at night, I barely had time to sleep, let alone enjoy what little life I had. My diet consisted mostly of instant noodles and cheap granola bars, and I hadn't bought anything new in months. But I didn't care. I was determined to go on that trip, if only to prove to Carly that I wasn't the failure she seemed to think I was. By late November, I had finally saved up enough. It wasn't easy, but seeing that $5,000 in my bank account felt like a victory. Carly called me one evening, her tone brisk, like she was doing me a favor by even picking up the phone. We need to finalize the bookings, she said. Have you got your share ready? Yeah, I said, already opening my banking app. Good. Transfer it to me tonight. I don't want to risk prices going up. I sent her the money immediately, my hands shaking slightly as I clicked confirm. Watching my account drop back down to double digits was nerve-wracking, but it was worth it. I was finally going to Hawaii to treat myself. December 23rd rolled around, and the house was buzzing with excitement. Well, Carly and Mom were buzzing. I was mostly just trying to keep up. Carly kept talking about all the activities she had planned. The dinner cruises, the snorkeling trips, the spa days. She even picked out matching outfits for the family photos we'd apparently be taking. The night before we were supposed to leave, I packed my suitcase with a mix of excitement and relief. After everything I'd been through, I finally felt like I'd earned this trip. But the next morning things started to feel off. Mom and Dad were unusually quiet, avoiding eye contact whenever I walked into the room. Carly and Brad were acting normal, but in that overly casual way people do when they're hiding something. I tried to shake it off, chalking it up to pre-trip jitters. At breakfast, Carly cleared her throat, and the room went silent. So before we head out, we need to talk, she said, her tone serious but with a hint of fake sympathy. I set my fork down, already feeling uneasy. Okay, about what? Carly glanced at Brad, who nodded like they had rehearsed this. The restaurant, well, we've hit a rough patch. Brad and I have been running the numbers and they aren't what we projected, and the trip is costing a little more than we expected. We had to make some adjustments to the budget. I was so confused and the whole vibe shifted. What kind of adjustments? I asked. Well, Carly said, drawing the word out like she was trying to soften the blow. We've decided it's best if you don't come with us. Your contribution is helping cover the rest of our costs. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, but she wasn't joking. What? I finally managed to say. Carly sighed like this was hard for her. It's nothing personal, Elena. It's just that Brad and I never had a proper honeymoon, and this trip is really important for us. You understand, right? Wait, I said, my voice shaking. I already paid my share. I worked double shifts for months to save up for this. Mom jumped in, her tone overly patient, like she was explaining something to a child. Elena, you have to understand. Carly and Brad are under a lot of stress with the restaurant. This trip is a chance for them to recharge. Family helps family. But I'm family too, I said, my voice rising. I paid for this trip just like everyone else. How is it fair that I get left behind? Dad avoided my gaze, staring down at his coffee mug like it held all the answers. Carly meanwhile just shrugged. Life isn't always fair, Elle. Besides, someone needs to stay back and watch the house. That was it. That was their big justification for stealing my money and kicking me off the trip. I was so angry I could barely see straight, but I knew there was no point arguing. Mom and Dad were firmly on Carly's side, as always. I dashed to my room and spent the rest of the day there, listening to the sound of suitcases being zipped and last-minute plans being made. No one came to check on me, not even Mom. By the time evening rolled around, I had made my decision. The next morning, I woke up early and joined them on the porch as they loaded their luggage into the taxi. Carly was in high spirits, chatting about the resort's amenities and all the Instagram-worthy moments she had planned. Brad was his usual silent self, nodding along as he loaded the bags. Don't forget to water the plants, Mom said as she climbed into the taxi, and check the mail every day. Carly leaned out the window, flashing me a smile that was anything but friendly. We'll send you pictures so you don't feel too left out, she laughed as she waved past me. I waved and smiled, playing my part perfectly. Have a great trip, I called out as the taxi pulled away. As soon as they turned the corner, I dropped the act. I definitely wasn't going to let them get away with this, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. As soon as their taxi disappeared around the corner, I went inside, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to Grandpa's house, my house. I'd spent the past year biting my tongue, staying quiet while Carly and Brad treated my inheritance like their personal kingdom. But after what they'd done with the Hawaii trip, I was done playing nice. Walking through the front door felt unreal. The place didn't even look like Grandpa's house anymore. Carly had replaced almost everything, from the furniture to the curtains. The warm, cozy space I grew up loving had been transformed into something cold and impersonal. Even the walls felt wrong, painted in dull grays and whites instead of the soft greens and yellows Grandpa had always preferred. I stood there for a moment taking it all in, and then I got to work. The first thing I did was grab every box and suitcase I could find. Carly and Brad had left plenty behind, probably because they assumed no one would dare touch their stuff. I went room by room, methodically packing up their designer clothes, their overpriced decor, and even the little knickknacks Carly had scattered around to make the house hers. Grandpa's old study was the hardest to deal with. It used to be my favorite room in the house, with its cozy leather chair and shelves full of books. Now it was filled with Brad's junk. Random tools, stacks of paperwork, and a collection of ugly modern art pieces that didn't match anything else in the house. I found their important documents in a filing cabinet and packed those too. I wasn't about to throw away anything they might actually need, but I wasn't leaving it here either. If they wanted their stuff back, they could come and get it from storage. By the time I finished packing, the living room was filled with boxes and suitcases. It was almost satisfying seeing all their things stacked up like that. Like I was finally taking control of something they'd stolen from me. Then I called a moving company. I explained the situation. Yes, it was last minute. And yes, it was Christmas Eve, but I needed everything out of the house as soon as possible. They quoted me triple the usual rate and I didn't even flinch. Just get it done, I told them. While I waited for the movers to arrive, I walked through the house one more time. With all of Carly and Brad's stuff packed up, it felt a little more like Grandpa's place again. His fishing rods were still in the corner of the garage untouched. The old kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg, was still there too. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The movers showed up a few hours later. I directed them to the boxes in the living room, and they started loading everything into the truck. They worked quickly, probably because they wanted to get home to their families, and within an hour, the house was empty of Carly and Brad's possessions. After they left, I made one more call to a 24-hour locksmith. I wasn't taking any chances. Carly and Brad still had keys to the house, and I didn't trust them not to barge back in whenever they felt like it. The locksmith arrived just before sunset, and by the time he finished, every lock in the house had been changed. Anything else you need? He asked, packing up his tools. No, that's it, I said, handing him a tip. Thanks for coming out on such short notice. He nodded and left, and I stood there in the doorway staring out at the quiet street. For the first time in what felt like forever, the house was mine again. That night, I made myself a simple dinner and sat at the old kitchen table. It wasn't fancy, but it felt right. I could almost hear Grandpa's voice in the back of my mind, telling me stories about his childhood or offering advice on life. You did good, kiddo, I imagined him saying. After dinner, I wandered into the living room and sat in the one piece of furniture I'd refused to let Carly replace. Grandpa's leather chair. It was old and worn with cracks in the material and a slightly lopsided cushion, but it was still the most comfortable seat in the house. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Instagram. As expected, Carly had already started posting photos from Hawaii. There she was, lounging by the pool with Brad, both of them grinning like they hadn't left me alone here. Living our best lives, the caption read. I rolled my eyes and put my phone away. I wasn't going to let her ruin this moment. Instead, I focused on making a plan. I wasn't just going to pack up their stuff and change the locks. I was going to take back control of my life. I started drafting an email to a property management company I'd looked into a while back. If Carly and Brad couldn't respect the fact that this was my house, then I'd find tenants who could. By the time I finished, it was late and I was exhausted, but for the first time in months I felt like I could actually sleep. I went upstairs to my old room, the one place Carly hadn't bothered to touch, and collapsed onto the bed. The glow-in-the-dark stars Grandpa and I had stuck to the ceiling years ago were still there, faint but comforting. As I drifted off, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. For once, I wasn't letting Carly walk all over me. This was my house, my inheritance, and my life, and I was finally taking it back. I couldn't wait to see their reaction when they came back. And I was ready for whatever they decided to throw my way, because this time I'd had enough. As expected, the day after Christmas, my phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, it was just a couple of texts from Mom asking me to call her. Then there was one from Dad, which is rare because he usually lets Mom handle everything. Finally, Carly chimed in with a string of messages that went from annoyed to outright furious. I ignored them all, but when the calls started coming in rapid fire, Mom, Carly, Mom again, then Dad, I knew I couldn't avoid it much longer. I sighed, put my coffee down, and answered the next call. What the hell is going on? Carly's voice exploded through the speaker before I could even say hello. Why are all of our things in storage and why don't our keys work? I held the phone away from my ear, letting her rant for a solid minute before cutting in. Because it's my house, I said, even and calm. And you've overstayed your welcome. Your house. Carly scoffed. Are you serious right now? Do you have any idea how inconvenient this is? Brad and I have been planning this trip for months, and now we come back to this. Inconvenient. I said, my voice rising despite myself. You want to talk about inconvenience? Let's talk about how you stole my money, excluded me from the trip I paid for, and left me here to babysit a house you treated like garbage. How's that for inconvenience? There was a pause, just long enough for me to think I'd actually gotten through to her. Then Carly laughed, a short, sharp sound that made my blood boil. You're being so dramatic, she said. It's not like you were actually going to enjoy the trip anyway. You've never been the adventurous type, Elena. We were doing you a favor. A favor? I repeated, barely able to keep my voice steady. Yeah, Carly said, like it was obvious. And now you're acting like a spoiled brat because we used the money for something important. Family helps family, remember? Funny how that only seems to apply when it benefits you, I shot back. But sure, Carly, keep telling yourself that you're the victim here. Before she could respond, I hung up. Then my mom called. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but I knew she wouldn't stop until I answered. Elena, she said, her voice sharp and accusatory. What were you thinking, throwing Carly and Brad out like that? They're family. Are they? I asked, unable to hide the bitterness in my tone. Because they sure didn't act like family when they stole my money. The money I worked hard to earn, and left me behind. Don't be ridiculous, Mom said. They didn't steal anything. They needed help and you were in a position to provide it. You should be proud of that. Proud? I repeated, laughing without humor. You want me to be proud of being treated like a doormat? Mom sighed, the way she always did when she thought I was being unreasonable. Elena, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Carly and Brad are going through a tough time, and you're making it worse by kicking them out of the house. Where are they supposed to go? I don't care. It's not my problem, I said flatly. It's not my problem anymore. Of course it's your problem. Mom snapped. You're being selfish, Elena. I didn't raise you to be like this. Selfish? I said, my voice rising. You want to talk about selfish? How about the fact that Carly and Brad lived in my house rent-free for months, trashed the place, and then turned around and stole $5,000 from me? Or how about the fact that you and Dad let it happen and didn't say a word? If anyone here is selfish, it's obviously you. Shut up, Mom said, her tone icy. I'm not going to argue with you anymore. Fix this, Elena. Now. Before I could respond, she hung up. For the rest of the day, my phone kept buzzing with messages and calls. Mom, Dad, Carly. Even Brad chimed in with a passive-aggressive text about family loyalty. I ignored them all. By the time evening rolled around, I was exhausted, not physically but emotionally. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone as it buzzed for what felt like the 100th time that day. Finally, I picked it up and sent a single message to the family group chat. I'm not fixing anything. The house is mine and I've made my decision. If you want to talk about loyalty, maybe start by looking in the mirror. Then I put my phone on silent, set it on the table and walked away. I felt the satisfaction of standing up for myself and defending what's actually mine. After a week, my phone, which had been buzzing nonstop for hours, now sat still on the coffee table. No more calls, no more messages. It was almost eerie but also freeing. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't letting my family's drama dictate my life. They could call me selfish or ungrateful all they wanted, but I knew the truth. I wasn't the villain in this story. The next morning, I got an email from the property management company I'd contacted a few days earlier. They'd reviewed the house and had already started lining up potential tenants. Seeing their response felt like a small victory. Carly and Brad may have treated my inheritance like a free vacation home, but I wasn't going to let them ruin it forever. By the time New Year's rolled around, the house was officially listed as available for rent. The company assured me they'd handle everything. Background checks, maintenance requests, even collecting rent. All I had to do was sit back and let them do their job. Meanwhile, Carly and Brad had officially moved back in with my parents. I heard about it through the family grapevine, mostly from my cousin Jessica, who's never been great at keeping secrets. They're staying in your old room, Jessica said during one of our weekly calls. Carly's already complaining about the lack of closet space, and Brad keeps hogging the TV in the living room. Your mom's losing her mind. I couldn't help but laugh. It was petty, sure, but after everything Carly and Brad had put me through, the thought of them cramped into my childhood bedroom felt like poetic justice. As the weeks passed, the messages from my family grew less frequent. Mom still called occasionally, but her tone had shifted. She wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Elena, she said during one of our last conversations, don't you think it's time to let this go? Carly and Brad are struggling. They need support right now, and you've turned your back on them. They're not struggling, Mom, I replied. They're just facing the consequences of their actions for once. There's a difference. Mom sighed. I just wish you could see things from their perspective. I did, I said. For years. And all it got me was an empty bank account and a house full of their junk. I'm done bending over backward to make everyone else happy. It's time I start thinking about myself for a change. Mom didn't have much to say after that. By mid-February, the house was officially rented out to a young couple with a baby on the way. They loved the place, especially the backyard, and promised to take good care of it. Knowing the house was in good hands was a huge relief. With the rent covering the property taxes and then some, I finally had some breathing room financially. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I even managed to save up enough to treat myself to a weekend getaway with some friends. Nothing fancy, just a cabin in the mountains, but it was exactly what I needed. Meanwhile, Carly and Brad's situation wasn't going quite as smoothly. Jessica kept me updated whether I wanted her to or not. They're driving your parents insane, she said during one call. Carly's always complaining about how unfair you were. And Brad just sits there agreeing with her. I think your dad's about to snap. Good, I said, laughing. Maybe they'll finally get a taste of what it's like to deal with her full time. By the time spring rolled around, Carly had stopped trying to contact me entirely. I blocked her on Instagram after one too many passive-aggressive posts about loyalty and family values, and her calls had dwindled to nothing. Mom still called occasionally, but even those conversations were getting shorter. The funny thing is, I thought I'd feel guilty about it all, cutting ties with my family, standing up to Carly, taking back my house. I thought it would weigh on me, make me second-guess myself. But it didn't. If anything, I felt lighter. One night, as I sat on the porch swing of my rented house, sipping a cup of tea, I found myself thinking about Grandpa. I wondered what he would have said if he could see me now. I'm proud of you, kiddo, I imagined him saying, just like he used to when I was a child. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had done something right, something for me. Not to please anyone else or live up to someone else's expectations. It might not seem like a big deal to you all, but for me it felt like finally taking a breath after being underwater. Tell me in the comments if you ever had one of those moments where you realized you're done being walked over, because that's exactly what this felt like.